is 12 to 45. The question is at Part 2 stand part.
Mr Chairman.
I call Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. There's a range of matters dealt with in Part 2. And can I say it's excellent to be getting into some of the substance of the bill and some of the more constructive aspects of this legislation. Part 2 deals with the range of licences that various participants in the manufacture and supply of psychoactive substances need to acquire. It also deals with the manner or the process in which products can be approved, and it further deals with the register of products that are considered by the Expert Advisory Committee, and I'd like to address each of those matters. The first, I think, to really go to, and it's somewhat at the heart of this legislation, is the process for approving products. This, just quietly, is the big step forward in drug regulation in New Zealand, because up until now, every time we've seen a new drug, except for alcohol and tobacco, every time we've seen a new drug, we've wanted to ban it, ban it, ban it, ban it. That's the only reaction, the only response that our legislation over the decades has been able to come up with, and it's a rather blunt approach. And in the 21st century, a less and less effective approach. And so for the first time in our drug regulation laws, there is a mechanism for approving a psychoactive substance. And why would we want to do that? Well, a lot of people have said, oh, just ban them, get them out of the dairies, which of course this does do. Well, I'm glad to hear that New Zealand First thinks that, and they can get up and explain why they think that. But people say, look, just ban them, get rid of them, and that'll make the problem go away. Because that's been so effective for cannabis, hasn't it? And it was so effective for alcohol as well. It worked really, really well. And it's worked really, really well for a whole range of other substances too. So the people who say just ban it and the problem will go away simply need to open their eyes and look around them and see all the harms that are actually caused by prohibition itself. Now, I'm not saying that prohibition isn't appropriate for some substances, but I think it's absolutely certain that prohibition is inappropriate for a number of substances. And what this bill seeks to do is to create a legal, regulated market for substances which have been proven to be of low risk. And that's what Clause 35 is all about, granting of approval. The grounds for approving a product, the most important of those grounds, is that the degree of harm that the product poses to individuals using the product is no more than a low risk of harm. Those final words are important. Nobody is claiming that any of these substances are safe. That is not the intention here at all. The intention is to create a process through which certain substances can be proven to be low risk in comparison to other substances, and that those substances, those products, can go on the market. Because what we know is people prefer to buy their drugs from a legal market. There isn't really a legal regulated market at the moment, except for alcohol and tobacco, of course. But these so-called legal highs have existed in a legal and unregulated market. But what countless submitters came and told us at the Select Committee, and indeed what I have learned from going and visiting people who work in the mental health and addiction treatment sector, is that people who use cannabis have been replacing that substance with these legal highs because they prefer to go to a legal market. They don't want to go to the gangs. They don't want to go to the dodgy drug dealers who engage in criminal activity. They don't want to have to interact with criminals to buy these products, but they do still want to buy them. And so what we're creating here is an opportunity for people who do want to use psychoactive substances to be able to obtain those which are of lowest risk and those which have been proven to be of low risk. Mr. Chairman. Now, Mr. Chairman, what that means is that instead of the current situation where people are replacing cannabis with substances that are in fact higher risk than cannabis, they can replace that drug with substances which have been proven through the trials, the clinical trials, which they can now be undertaken, that these substances are of lower risk. And that would be a significant improvement on the current situation, because what we know right now is that that our addiction treatment centres are dealing with people who were previously using cannabis, and that comes with a certain level of risk, have replaced it with higher risk substances because they're legal. And we know that we actually now know the mechanism why these substances are higher risk. They adhere at a much greater rate to the receptors in the brain that that the active ingredients in these drugs adhere to, and because they adhere at a higher rate, the high occurs much more quickly, it is much harder, it's much faster, and these drugs are far more addictive. And trying to get off these drugs is a far greater challenge to people, and it's a far greater challenge to the professionals trying to support people trying to get off these drugs than it has been trying to support people who want to give up cannabis use. And I think that's an important thing for us to be mindful of. Sir, one of the changes that we made to the legislation following submissions by many of the submitters is to the register of products. Originally this was going to be just a register of approved products so that people could see all the products that had been approved and what the active ingredients were in them. Well, the significant change that we've made is to say this will now be a register of all the products. So every single product that a manufacturer applies to the authority for approval, even if it's turned down, will now appear in this register. And that means that people can actually see the facts about the substances which have been turned down, the harms that may be related to them, the reasons why they were turned down. And I think that just having that knowledge available to people helps achieve the purpose of this legislation, which is to reduce the harm associated with psychoactive substances. Mr. Chairman, at the beginning of Part 2 in Clause 12, we deal with the licences that are available and the licences that are necessary to hold in order to be either a manufacturer, an importer or supplier of these substances. And what I think was one of the glaring mistakes in the original drafting was that there was no licence to be a retailer of these substances. And you have to hold a licence if you are to be a retailer of alcohol. It makes absolute sense that you must hold a licence in order to be a retailer of psychoactive substances. That really achieves two things, sir. The first is that in order to hold one of these licences, you have to be a person of good character. Now, ultimately, that is a subjective statement, but it is analogous to the situation with alcohol, where someone has to have proven that they are, they like to act within the law. They like to, they are a careful person who is mindful of the activity that they are engaged in, and that's important. That we only really have the right people selling these substances to youngsters. And the other thing is, hopefully, they should actually know something about the substances that they're selling. That they'll be able to provide factual, evidence-based information to the people who are purchasing these substances, and that again is an important step in trying to achieve harm reduction. So, sir, I think, again, it was something that was missing from the original legislation that everybody on the committee instantly recognised needed to be included. Paul Hutchison, the chairman, he indeed instantly recognised that there was a need to include licences for retailers. So that I think also recognises round about where these substances lay in terms of relative harms. If it's appropriate for alcohol, for the sellers of alcohol to hold a licence, then it is also appropriate for the sellers of these substances to hold a licence. And I can say on this side of the House, we wholeheartedly support those amendments to the legislation.
I call Dr. Jiang Yang.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm delighted to